Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are diving deep into something that powers, well, a huge chunk of the internet you use every day, React. And the big question we're tackling, really based on the stack of sources you've shared with us, is why? Why did this specific library become, the undeniable king of front-end web development?
Right.
Your sources give us a fantastic look, actually.
Yes.
A real mix, some candid, maybe slightly exasperated takes on its quirks.
Yeah.
And then also a very straightforward list of the advantages.
Yeah.
Our mission is to pull out the important bits from all of it, connect those perspectives,
Yeah.
and try to figure out how it got here.
Exactly. And the sources let us see it from both ends, right? The developer's view, the day-to-day, the freedoms, the frustrations, and also let's say, the practical business benefits that really drove adoption. We'll try and weave those together.
Okay, so right up front, the main claim from the sources. React is dominant. It's the force in front end.
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets technical, and the sources jump on this immediately. It's a library, not a framework. You hear that all the time.
Constantly. Developers will correct you.
Right. But let's frame this not just as like semantics, but as a core thing that shapes everything else.
And understanding why that distinction matters is key, according to the sources. Frameworks, they suggest, are often more opinionated, maybe restrictive.
Okay.
They come with built-in ways to do routing, state management, styling. The structure's there, but you often have to play by their rules.
Right. You buy into the whole system.
Exactly. React, being a library, is different. It gives you that core piece, the UI rendering, the components, but leaves almost everything else up to you.
Ah.
You pick your own routing library, your state management, whatever. The sources definitely paint this as a double-edged sword. Great freedom, but also...
Potential chaos, or just spending ages deciding.
Yeah, potential decision paralysis, maybe,
Yeah.
if you're not careful
Okay,
here.
that flexibility, that choice, that seems central. So with that setup, let's dig into the reasons the sources give for React winning. The first big one, maybe the elephant in the room, Meta, Facebook's backing. One source is pretty clear. This gave it immediate safety, relevance. I mean, building something at Facebook's scale, that suggests robustness.
Absolutely.
And that association, even with, the source's jokes about data collection, it lent huge credibility and resources early on.
Totally. That corporate sponsorship, the scale, it's not trivial. It impacts trust, adoption, especially early days.
Right. So building on that foundation, the next big thing highlighted is the component-based architecture.
Yeah, this was a fundamental shift. The sources talk about combining HTML structure and JavaScript logic using JSX.
Okay.
So you define bits of your UI as these self-contained, reusable components. Then you nest them together to build up complex interfaces.
So breaking away from that old strict separation of HTML, CSS, JS.
Kinda, yeah.
Huh.
But the huge win is the modularity. You build reusable blocks, not giant pages.
Got it. And after components, maybe the most talked about, almost mysterious part the sources highlight.
Yeah.
The virtual DOM, called React's piece de resistance.
Oh, yeah. And the big reason for its speed, or perceived speed anyway.
It's interesting. One source notes that most people don't really get the deep mechanics of how it works, but they know the outcome. React figures out the absolute minimum changes needed for the actual browser DOM.
Exactly. Instead of re-rendering everything, it calculates the diff, updates just the necessary bits. That means faster, smoother UIs without developers needing to manually micro-optimize constantly.
That performance boost is a huge draw. But, okay, building React apps isn't always smooth. The sources talk about state management.
Right. React gives you use state for simple stuff inside a component, but as apps get bigger, sharing data across many components gets tricky.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
So that's where you bring in things like use reducer, use context, or often external libraries, Redux, MobX, Zoostan, there are tons. And the sources point out this adds complexity. You end up lifting state up using these global stores. Sometimes it gets hard to track where data comes from or why something changed, like playing Minesweeper, one source says.
Yeah, click one thing and who knows what explodes.
Oh.
Common pain point then.
Definitely. Developers spend a lot of time thinking about state.
And managing that complexity, especially logic and side effects inside components.
Yeah.
That's where hooks come in, right? According to the sources.
Exactly. They basically replace the old class components and lifecycle methods.
So things like use state and use effect let you put more complex logic, data fetching, loading states, subscriptions right into functional components.
Yep. Streamline things a lot. Though one source does warn you have to understand things like dependency arrays properly.
Or else infinite loop.
Or else infinite loops, yeah.
Yeah.
It happens. But the feeling is strong. Once you hook, you never go back. They really change the developer experience.
Okay. And tied closely to that library idea we started with is the ecosystem. The sources call it vast.
Vast is putting it mildly, like a buffet with endless options for routing, state, styling, testing, everything.
So many NPM packages.
So many. And the sources note, some are great, well-maintained, others are abandoned or super niche.
Right.
So you can, as one source jokes, spend way too much time just choosing libraries instead of building your app. Or accidentally build something bloated.
Choice overload.
Yeah.
A definite theme. And we can't forget React Native, the mobile sibling.
Right. The promise was huge. One code base for both iOS and Android.
Revolutionary, if true.
Yeah.
How does it stack up in the sources?
Pragmatically, they call it the 80% dream. It gets you most of the way there, sharing a ton of UI patterns.
Wow.
But that last 20% often needs platform-specific tweaks, debugging, maybe native code. It's powerful, saves a lot of effort, but it's not quite a perfect write once, run anywhere solution.
Okay, fair enough. So we've hit the foundations, the developer experience, the good, and the tricky bits. Let's switch gears slightly to the more direct advantages the sources list out.
Sounds good. The first one highlighted is that React is considered easy to learn, relatively speaking.
Compared to what, maybe older frameworks?
Yeah, or maybe things like Angular initially. The sources stress you just need basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. The barrier to entry isn't super high.
Which means developers get productive faster. Saves training time.
Exactly. That helps adoption significantly.
And flowing from the components and virtual DOM we talked about, faster to build.
The sources connect this back, minimizing those direct, expensive DOM updates, reusing components. It helps you build UIs that feel fast more naturally.
You're working with abstractions that are just more efficient for UI stuff.
Right. And the scope of where you can use React is huge. That leads to the point about tons of applications.
Okay, so not just websites.
Nope. React on for the web, sure. But React Native for iOS and Android apps, even things like Electron for desktop apps.
Wow.
And they list the big names using it. Facebook, Instagram, X, Airbnb, Netflix. It scales. You can use it for massive apps or just sprinkle into existing projects. That modularity helps.
Makes sense. It's also noted for creating dynamic web pages.
Yeah, the sources point out that building really interactive stuff, things that change a lot based on user input, that can get messy and slow with just basic tools. React's whole model is geared towards managing that state and updating the UI efficiently when things change. Good for complex, interactive UIs.
And super important for visibility online, SEO friendliness.
Yes, this is a big one. Purely client-side JavaScript apps can sometimes be tricky for search engine crawlers. They might just see a blank page at first.
Right, before the JavaScript loads and builds everything.
Exactly. But React can do server-side rendering, SSR, build the initial HTML on the server, send that down first.
So the crawler sees content immediately.
Right. Makes the page light, readable for crawlers, helps with ranking. A big plus compared to older client-side approaches.
Then if shitcode reuse comes up again, that component structure paying off.
Big time. Build a component once, use it everywhere. Same app, different projects, even web and mobile via React Native, like we said.
Saves time, saves money, lets you add features faster without reinventing the wheel.
Definitely. And for bigger teams, testability of apps is highlighted.
Easier to test React apps. Why is that?
The sources say because views are treated as a function of state. Given a certain state, the output should be predictable. This makes writing tests simpler, more flexible compared to maybe manually manipulating the DOM. One source even prefers it to Angular for testing.
Interesting. Okay, and lastly, accessibility of tools for developers.
Yeah, beyond just the sheer number of NPM packages, there are really good tools specifically for React development.
Like browser extensions.
Exactly. The React developer tools, Redux dev tools, they plug right into your browser, let you inspect components, see state changes, check performance. Huge help for debugging.
Okay, so summing this all up, it sounds like React's dominance is a mix. It had the wind at its back with Meta's support and this huge ecosystem building up.
Momentum and resources.
And then the core tech components, virtual DOM, hooks, offered a genuinely different, often more efficient way to build UIs.
Right. Technical innovation.
Which translates into those practical benefits.
Yeah.
Speed, easier learning curve, works everywhere, good for SEO with SSR, code reuse, good testing, makes sense for businesses and devs.
It covers a lot of bases.
And circling back to that candid source, you don't have to love it, but it's so widespread now. In modern front end, you kind of don't have a choice.
Pretty much. For many jobs, many projects, you need to know it. It became the standard partly on merit, but also, as the source said, because everyone else is talking about it and using it, that critical mass effect.
Yeah.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Given this whole picture, the flexibility versus the complexity, the cool features versus the learning hurdles, the benefits and the pain points, what does React's story tell us about how tech gets adopted? Is it always the purely technically best thing that wins?
Or is it more about that momentum, the backing, the community, maybe just being good enough and easy to start with?
Exactly. How much do those other factors shape what becomes standard in fields like web development that move so incredibly fast? Something to consider.
That is a really great question to leave folks with. Thank you for sharing these sources and letting us really unpack the world of React for you in this deep dive. We hope this gives you a clearer picture of why it's the king